all the world's leaders, North Korea's Kim Jong-un has probably been criticised the most in Trump's tweets. And after the isolated country's leader issued a New Year's Day nuclear warning to Washington, Trump was keen to hit back. He stressed that his nuclear button is bigger and his arsenal more powerful.
The entire US mainland is within the range of our nuclear strike, and the button is always on the table in my office. They should clearly know that this is certainly not a threat, but rather a reality.
Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it's a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works.
This is certainly not anything to joke about, but I think the situation, despite the confrontational rhetoric, has been stabilized somewhat. There's a recognition that there's a stalemate. Rex Tillerson a few weeks ago did indicate the possibility of negotiations even without preconditions. Donald Trump probably believed that this kind of talk remains popular with his right-wing supporters. Certainly, Donald Trump at this stage does not believe that he is ready to make the first move. So perhaps the two Koreas may make the first move.
The other developments to bring to your attention, Kim Jong-un has now reopened a cross-border communications link with South Korea in what's being seen as a significant diplomatic breakthrough anyway. Meantime, the standoff, though, between the US and North Korea looks set to continue into 2018 after what's already been 12 months of personal attacks and vicious threats from both sides.
The era of strategic patience with the North Korean regime has failed. North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury.
The US neglects the international community's will to establish peace on the Korean peninsula.
Behave like children, fighting each other in kindergarten, and nobody can stop them.
And we can't have madmen out there shooting rockets all over the place. We will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
No one other than Trump himself is on a suicide mission.
해당한 어휘를 신중하게 선택하여 상대를 보호하며.
We need a pause. We need dialogue.
He is a sick puppy.
Now, the president is going tit for tat on this whole nuclear rhetoric. Some say putting us potentially in harm's way when he ups the rhetoric himself. Senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, Rebecca Heinrichs, on all that. Rebecca, you know, I know this president is where he is because of his tweets, because of his language, because of his bluntness and all. This isn't a Democratic thing or a Republican thing. I don't think it's wise for him to speak like this to a guy who's a certifiable nutcase in North Korea. I just think it ups the ante needlessly. What do you say?
Well, I readily admit it's uncomfortable, it's unsettling. I don't, you know, I'm uncomfortable when any leader of any country talks about nuclear weapons seemingly flippantly. But I think what President Trump has been trying to do is to communicate that the United States isn't bluffing about our willingness to use force. I will say, to put this into some context, President Obama, President Bush made veiled threats about our willingness to use military force, the strength of our military to take care of North Korea. What's different about President Trump, of course, is that he's believable. And so, but that believability is necessary if you're going to have a credible threat towards North Korea. So it does seem to me to fit into his larger plan to have this pressure campaign. I understand why it makes people uncomfortable, but I think it's worth reminding folks that the real threat is the aggressor, and that's North Korea. That's Kim Jong-un in North Korea.
I don't know. It has a feel of Beavis and Butthead, though, to me. Like, you know, comparing button sizes and all the rest. And I just worry, I mean, is this the direction which we want to go? Is this, if we had, God forbid, another Cuban Missile Crisis type deal, would that be the way we would want to start it? How do you tamp things down, or is that even a goal here?
Well, I do think that at some point here, you know, you want an off-ramp. And by that, I mean you want the North Koreans. The goal here is to coerce Kim in North Korea to relinquish his nuclear weapons. That doesn't seem to be happening. That doesn't seem to be working. Recently, there was reports that China is still selling oil to North Korea, and you can't shoot missiles without oil. You need fuel. And so it looks like the Chinese are not helping the United States. So we are sort of moving down towards this very precarious path towards military force, I'm afraid. And so you do want to have an off-ramp so that the North Koreans, if they do decide to come to the table and say, okay, let's talk about our nuclear program, you want to let that happen. And so, you know, if I were advising the president, I would say at some point you're going to have to start moving in that direction. But I do think that the North Koreans and the Chinese have got to understand that this administration is not bluffing. I've spoken with General McMaster about the subject, and he's not bluffing. And so the
when you
sooner
say
the
he's
Chinese,
not bluffing, that he's seriously considering war options?
I do believe that, Neil. I believe
and what would
that
they include?
Well, I believe that, you know, I don't think that the United States would do anything first preemptively. I do think that it would be in response to what the United States understands.
Let's say they launch a missile, right? And we would, in response, try to shoot it down. Is that an act of war?
It's certainly not an act of war if you're defending yourself or your allies. I understand that people continue to make that argument that's preposterous. We have missile defenses in place.
Right.
If the missile actually goes through the envelope, they call it, through the area in which the missile defense systems are designed to defend against, I believe that the Japanese and the United States is willing to intercept that missile if it's headed towards a dangerous area, if it's headed towards innocent civilians. I believe that if the North Koreans test an actual nuclear weapon on a missile, that would cross a line. If they were to shoot a missile towards Guam, that would cross a line. And this is my own analysis. I think that there are lines that the administration is not willing to talk about or draw. But if that should happen, I do believe that the United States military is in place to respond, and it would not be a pinprick. It would be overwhelming. And the faster the Chinese and the North Koreans can understand that this is a serious option and this is not just, you know, threats that are meaningless, the quicker we can resolve this without using force.
All right. Well, watch closely, Rebecca. Good seeing you again. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Neil.
And that is North Korea offering an Olympics olive branch to South Korea. The rival countries reopening a border hotline earlier today to discuss the Pyeongchang Winter Games, the diplomatic breakthrough coming hours after President Trump issued a warning to North Korea. He said this on Twitter. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I, too, have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. Meanwhile, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said yesterday America will continue its hard line against North Korea, following reports that Pyongyang might be preparing to fire another missile soon.
We need to have them stop nuclear weapons, and they need to stop it now. So North Korea can talk with anyone they want, but the U.S. is not going to recognize it or acknowledge it until they agree to ban the nuclear weapons that they have.
Joining me right now, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, now Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and Fox News contributor, Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, good to see you, sir.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of all this?
Well, I think what the North Koreans are doing is pure propaganda. I'm not sure it has anything to do with U.S. pressure. I think it has more to do with the fact that they are very close to achieving their long-sought objective of being able to deliver nuclear weapons to any target they want in the United States or worldwide. And I think they're playing on the gullibility of the current South Korean government, not to mention the gullibility of a lot of American political leaders, to make it look like they're somehow trying to open a channel of communication. It's, as I say, this is classic North Korean following the script of how to buy time. In this case, not much time that they need, I think, to get this capability.
But, I mean, in terms of answering Kim Jong-un with this mine is bigger than yours conversation, what do you think about that? I mean, is that the right tack? What should we be doing given that Kim Jong-un continues these threats taunting America?
Yeah, I think the taunting really, the taunting is fundamentally irrelevant. I think what we should do is move more forces to Guam, to Japan, into the Yellow Sea and the East Sea, because I don't think the military threat, the potential use of military force is going to be taken seriously until that buildup takes place. And it may sound paradoxical, but I think the one chance we have of convincing China that they better crack down themselves on North Korea, my view is we should reunify the peninsula, but to get China's attention is to make the military threat credible, and that hasn't happened yet.
Right. So what does this president need to do? I mean, I feel like a lot of the moves that President Trump has made has been as much to the subject as it is a message to China. For example, the strikes to Syria, telling the president of China while they're having dinner at Mar-a-Lago, the tough stance and the tough talk against North Korea, the fact that ISIS is being defeated. All of these are messages to China: we're serious. Do not mess around. Get on board or be with the terrorists. What's your take on that? What else does he need to do?
Well, I think that is the president's message. I mean, it took a while to convince a lot of foreign leaders that Barack Obama was no longer president. I think that's been accomplished. But whether the Chinese believe more is coming, I think is very much open to question. They've still followed their script, which is appease the Americans for a little while, cut off a little bit of oil, raise the temperature a little bit, and then when you think the Americans have their attention has wandered away, go back to business as usual. So under current circumstances, if the projections made by CIA Director Mike Pompeo and others about how close the North has gotten in the past 12 to 18 months are accurate, there's not a lot of time to waste here. Talking to the North Koreans is a waste of time. Talking to the Chinese is increasingly I think, unlikely to produce the kind of result we need. So you're getting down fairly quickly to a binary choice. Live with North Korea with nuclear weapons, which Susan Rice, Barack Obama's national security advisor, is prepared to do, or look at military force. These are not attractive options, but that's where we're headed to.
Yeah, I want to close this out before I move on to domestic issues and ask you this. Should we be looking at this new sort of olive branch where North Korea is open to discussing the Olympic Games with South Korea? How significant do you see that?
I think it means nothing. Look, we should be happy that North Korea is willing to talk. We've talked directly and indirectly to North Korea for 25 years, during which period of time they have lied virtually every day. They've made commitments. They've reneged on them. What they have done is a classic nuclear proliferators game plan. They have used time in negotiations to perfect the complex science and technology they need to create deliverable nuclear weapons. And now they just need a little bit more time, and now they want to talk. Give me a break.
Button, but it's a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works.
This is certainly not anything to joke about, but I think the situation, despite the confrontational rhetoric, has been stabilized some.
All the world's leaders, North Korea's Kim Jong-un has
somewhat. There's a recognition that there's a stalemate. Rex Tillerson a few weeks ago did indicate the possibility of negotiations even without preconditions. Donald Trump probably believed that this kind of talk...
Probably been criticised the most in Trump's tweets, and after the isolated country's leader issued a New Year's Day nuclear warning to Washington, Trump was keen to hit back. He stressed that his nuclear button is bigger and his arsenal more powerful.
The entire US mainland is within the range of our nuclear strike, and the button is always on the table in my office. They should clearly know that this is certainly not a threat, but rather a reality.
Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear